So yeah, next we'll be hearing from Hazel Marsh, Associate Professor of Latin American Studies in the School of Politics, Philosophy, Language and Communications at UEA. Her research interests include popular music and social activism, politics and popular culture, collective memory and identity, conflict and disaster recovery, displacement and forced migration, and Romani contributions to cultural and social life. She has a strong focus on the use of participatory arts-based methods for action research, bringing the voices of socially, politically and economically marginalised groups into policy discussions. And she's currently leading 2 interdisciplinary collaborative projects funded by UEA's HRC Impact Acceleration Account, Romani and Traveller Voices in UK music archives, and strengthening Romani capacity in Colombia. So welcome, Hazel. Thank you. I will get your presentation up if you want to take the hot desk. So this is yours, yeah?
Yes, that's the one.
So I will just share this. Bear with me, everyone. And there we go. There's yours.
Thank you.
So hopefully that should be good.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. I'll leave it there. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks. Yes, but strengthening Romani voices in Colombia. Usually when we think about Romani gypsies, we tend to think of a European, people restricted by European boundaries. But no, in academia and knowledge construction on, about, and even from Romani groups is very Eurocentric. And it overlooks the very diverse contexts in which Romani identities are negotiated in different places in everyday life. So Strengthening Romani Voices is a project, it's a collaboration between myself, between the Colombian anthropologist, Esteban Acuña Cabanzo, and between also ProRom, who I'll talk a bit more about, a Romani organization based in Bogota. And we've been working with Romani peoples in Bogota whose mobilities go far beyond imagined European borders. So Romani people have been present in the Americas since the very early conquest and colonization of the continent. And there's even evidence that there were Romani crew members in the third of Columbus's voyages there. And at that time, going unnoticed was a matter of survival for Romani people. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the Spanish crown enacted frequent decrees and orders for the imprisonment, banishment, and even the execution of Romani people caught traveling without authorization, without the required authorization. And actually a typical punishment at the time for Romanis was between 6 and 8 years working in the galleys. But also at that time, in a typical catch-22 situation that we see, the Spanish crown prohibited the presence of Romani people in the New World. So to escape banishment or worse, most Romani people crossing the Atlantic used passing strategies. And this means that Romani immigration to the Americas has been really erased from any kinds of archival records and from national histories. Where we do see Romani people in the Americas at that time, it's in the imagination, it's the imagined gypsy of European literature. So we see here this figure from a Brazilian travel novel. And we see here on the right, La Gitana, oh, sorry, this is covering up, a gypsy woman. That was on a Mexican 5-peso note in circulation in Mexico. I can't remember the dates, sometime in the early 20th century. That's it, 1937 to 1978. And it's not a real, this woman didn't exist. It's not a Romani woman that did anything and that is being honored or depicted for any reason. It's just a generic figure based on an Algerian exotic woman that the US banknote engraver Robert Savage designed, and that was in circulation. So I mean, that's the idea people had of gypsy. They see this Brazilian figure. That's what gypsy means. And it's only now that archival work by historians is being done and showing glimpses of Romani lives in the Americas. And this is a newspaper report from the New York Times, a report about a group of gypsies arriving from Brazil. So I'll just let you have a look at, can you read that? Well, say no more. I mean, They were all right from a spectacular point of view, but we didn't let them in last year, so we best not let them in this year. So, I mean, anyway, in the 19th century, after independence, nation building projects in Latin America were based on racial notions of eugenics. So local indigenous and African descended populations were marginalized, while white European immigration was encouraged. And Romani families followed these larger trends of migration from Europe to the Americas at the time. At the end of the 19th century, particularly, there was a big increase in Romani arrivals to the continent for different reasons, partly because in parts of Central and Eastern Europe, in the country that is today Romania, Romani people were enslaved until the late 1850s, and after abolition, many chose to leave if they could. Partly because of increasing violent displacement and persecution in the years leading up to the world wars. And that's the reason why many of the families we've been working with in Bogota arrived in the continent. It was Nazi persecution in the early 20th century. And for others, it was just looking for better opportunities for increased, business, things like that. Now, in Colombia, migration policies were particularly harsh, even after independence from Spain. So Romani immigration just isn't documented very much at all. But oral history accounts evidence their continuous presence in the country since at least the late 19th century. Families arrived by boat to ports in the Caribbean and Brazil, and eventually made their way to Colombia, where there was a need for metalwork and other skills and trades that they could offer. In the 20th century, Colombia's internal conflict caused most Romani families to leave, especially in the 50s and the 80s, when that violence was very heavy. But some stayed and some returned afterwards. And they've adapted their trades to modern ways, to industrialization, to neoliberalization. So instead of working with copper, they now work with aluminium, with stainless steel. Instead of horse breeding, they do, or leather work, they do car repair, that kind of thing. And passing has, with this, passing has gained even more importance because Romani families were forced to settle in houses and neighborhoods where they might not have wanted their ethnicity to be publicly known. What Romani families have had to deal with stereotypes that I'm sure you're well aware of since their arrival. So it's no surprise that most families chose not to display their ethnicity publicly. But in 1977 in Colombia, political changes and a particularly unethical and damaging newspaper article led to change. This is the newspaper article in the town of Bucaramanga. So the article warned locals about Romani people and without any evidence presented the women as being thieves. So at that time, some Romani families decided that was enough. They were going to file a complaint about this. So they contacted academics working in official institutions, and they were academics who'd recently been working with Indigenous organization and Afro-Colombian organization. So they reached out to those academics. And it's out of these first exchanges that the Proceso, what's a very long name, PROROM, was established in 1998 to try to promote better understanding. And PROROM and the smaller organization Union Romani, also based in Bogota, have been instrumental to Romani legal recognition, ethnic recognition, and they've been pushing for the inclusion of Romani people in national legislation since throughout the 21st century. This was possible because the new 1991 constitution in Colombia established the state as a guarantor of the country's ethnic and cultural diversity. And Law 1381, passed in 2010, was intended to protect Rom. In Colombia, people prefer to call themselves Rom with a double R, or Romani. So sometimes I say Rom, to protect Rom cultural diversity, including their language, and guarantee their reparation for the collective victimization they'd suffered during the armed conflict. So as I said, PROROM and Union Romani have both been very active throughout the 21st century rather. So I'll just show you some photographs of the Romani neighborhoods where we've been working. They're mainly in the industrial zone of Bogota. And these are photographs that Esteban Acuña, the anthropologist I've been collaborating with, has taken. That's one of the warehouses where they do metalwork. welding. And that's just someone cooking some traditional food at home. So Romani representatives work with government to set up policies based on the current legal framework, while referentes, I suppose you can call them mediators, are employed by the state to implement those policies. But what happens is those referentes face enormous obstacles and barriers when they try to do this. And it was because we learned about these problems that we, discussed setting up this project with the referentes and carried out the workshop that I'm going to tell you about. In Bogota, there are 39 referentes employed by district secretaries and other official institutions to provide input around census taking and other policy actions. But although the government agencies rely on these referentes for their decision making, both the government representatives and the referentes don't receive training for this, or very little training. And in their interactions with the state institutions, the referentes find it really difficult to overcome these stereotypical expectations and the assumptions that the institutions have. They've just got that banknote in mind and the Brazilian wanderer in mind. So that they've either stereotypes that stigmatize or exoticize, but they're not seeing them. So they're finding it really difficult to communicate. So with Program, we organized a workshop. We wanted to create opportunities for these referentes and representatives to actually meet and discuss the problems they've been having with the state institutions, and also to generate new understandings about the capacities that they have and their strengths and skills. And also by bringing the referentes together in one space and having time to talk together, we wanted to think about solutions. What could we do to try and overcome these problems and overcome the stereotypes? So this is what led to our two-day workshop, which took place in the Casa Gitana, which was inaugurated in April 2022 with the Bogota, the mayor of Bogota, Claudia Lopez there. That's the premises where ProRom are based. That's inside. That's setting up our workshop on the first day of it. So on the first day, we talked about the problems the referentes had been having and issues around the stereotypes. And on the second day, we wanted to come up with ideas and solutions. But throughout, we wanted the focus to be not just on problems and stories of pain and difficulties, but on the achievements and strengths and capacities that the referentes have, to bring and discuss, potential ways of bringing about really positive change. So I think for new area studies, using arts-based methods that we've been using in this project, and I've collaborated with other colleagues on previous projects to use, are really useful. They provide ways to avoid intrusive questions in an interview, traditional social science interview. The participants can really have control over the narrative, really, and express their experiences and their feelings about those experiences more on their own terms. They don't have to put it into words. They can express what they want to do through art or drama. They can show you what they want to show you, and they don't need to start off from the stories of pain, which is usually what researchers want to go and learn about. They can start off from things that they're proud of or completely unrelated issues. So it allows you to learn a lot more about people's lives, I would argue, I think. So we used arts-based methods. I'll show you some pictures of what we did. On the first day, we did this activity, mapping out your city, and the participants worked in pairs or groups to draw maps of the physical spaces they move in for their work as referentes. And we asked them to indicate on those maps the places where they felt safe and good and the places where they felt unsafe. So some of them used stickers to indicate that, or put little smiley faces or frowning faces. They chose how they wanted to indicate that. But they produced maps like these. All of them felt very safe in the Casa Gitana, as you can see. And then after that, people worked individually to draw a map of a typical day in their life as a referente, and to mark on that day the times when they felt good and comfortable and safe, and times when they felt at risk and unsafe. Some more of the mapping yourself. They all chose different ways to do it, and a lot of them put the Andes in there. And then after lunch, we did the Gaje wall. Gaje is in English, it's gorja. In Spanish, Gaje, it's what Romani people use to refer to people who are not Romani, so it's non-Romanis. So we did this activity, the Gaje wall. We handed out these post-it notes and said, right, think about the good things about working as a referente and interacting with the Gaje, and think about the bad things. And put the good things on in blue and the bad things in yellow. So they wrote all these out and stuck them on the wall, and the wall filled. This is just the beginning of the activity. The wall was full, and then everyone went over and discussed the little post-it notes. And then we asked the participants as they went home to come the next day with a photograph or a video or an image or an object that demonstrated a very enriching experience for them in their work as referentes. And the next day, the good thing is they all came back. So hopefully that showed that they were engaged, they enjoyed it, it was a good sign. And they talked about, they'd gone to a lot of trouble. They'd put together montages of photos and little videos and things like that. And we heard, they got up one at a time and told us about trips into school, work with the elderly, the inauguration of the Casa Gitana, sewing workshops for women, how the women had made more modest swimming costumes so that they could go swimming. It was encouraging women to take up exercise with, more Victorian style swimming costumes. They showed us awards and prizes they'd been given for their work in EDI, I suppose you could say. The inclusion of the Romani language on the TV program on the linguistic diversity in Colombia, they got Romani in that. Celebrations of International Romani Day, which is the 8th of April. And this was so exciting. It's really exciting to see and hear all about these projects and different things people had been doing. And they didn't know this themselves. They hadn't heard from each other. They never got together and shared this. They thought they were all acting on their own. So it generated a lot of discussion and excitement and ideas for training tools, which I'll come back to at the end. So yeah, this workshop was the first opportunity that referentes had ever had, really, to come together as a team and discuss their collective work experiences and share ideas in a setting that they felt ownership of. Before this, they'd only met to discuss specific tasks and issues when summoned by the district secretaries and government departments, and usually in much smaller groups, and in very formalized settings with a huge power imbalance, where they didn't feel able to actually say what they wanted to say because of the setting and the context. So what they came up, just through the activities, what we learned is that they're really concerned about their security and physical safety. For their work as referentes, they're sent all over the place and they often have to travel on their own. And most of them are women because it's not a very well-paid job at all. You can't sustain a family with it. So they're usually women with small children at home. And they're really scared. They have to use the Transmilenio, the public transport system, traveling to places far away from their homes. Bogota is sprawling, and they're sent to areas that they're frightened of entering, and also in the city centre to go to the government offices. They're frightened of going there. They're frightened of pickpocketing, crime, gender-based violence, etc. Of course, these safety concerns aren't unique to Roma people at all. And it's interesting that even though their homes are in neighbourhoods that are very, I suppose, economically deprived, they feel safe there. Others might see those areas as quite unsafe, but they feel very comfortable and safe. Of course, security discourses tend to stigmatise low-income areas as being the dangerous ones, and that's where the policing is accordingly ordered to be. But anyway, but really what this indicates more deeply is a complete lack of institutional commitment to Romani people's ethnic rights and a complete lack of understanding, because for the government, it's as if all ethnic minorities are interchangeable and all the same, one big homogenous group. So, okay, we'll send these Romani referentes to work with Indigenous people or people that they've got no reason to have any knowledge of. So it's not just the physical fear of traveling all those distances, but symbolically what it means that they've just been sent anywhere they need someone. So the referentes feel they just don't understand why they're being asked to work with non-Romani people in all these areas. And these feelings are heightened by a very high rotation of officials in charge of dealing with Romani referentes. They need to start all over again with every change of local government and national government because all the staff changes and new government employees come in and they don't receive training and the Romani people have to start again. So it's quite a frustrating process. So to the Romani people we work with anyway, this feels like complete government indifference at best. So some of the things they said is they think Romani people are the same as all the other communities or ethnic groups. There isn't much willingness. Others actually spoke about discrimination. They discriminate against us because of our low level of education. They mock our language and our customs and our clothes. They don't know that Gitanos exist. They think we just go about reading palms. They underestimate us. We're stigmatized. So these are the kinds of things they talked about as well. One thing that we were quite surprised by was not all of those referendas were actually Romani. A few of them, not many, but just a few of them were Gaje. And that's because the level of education required to apply for the job excludes most Romani people. So if the government doesn't get enough, they just add, non-Romani people to the list of referendas that they have. So for the Gaje wall activity, even though they were anonymous, the Post-it notes were anonymous, it became clear that non-Romanis had written some positive things. They'd said they enjoyed the opportunities for learning that their working collaborations with Romani communities provided them with. We learn something new every day about Rom culture. We enjoy the food. We get to know the unity of the people. They're excellent parents, things like that. Some comments were a bit less positive. They said they're noisy, their beliefs are contradictory, they don't respect timetables. Those were some of the nicer things that were said. But on the other hand, the Romani notes had trouble with what they regarded as the highly individualistic nature and selfishness of the Gaje and their lack of unity, in particular with regard to care for the elderly. But they did admire Gaje punctuality and educational levels and opportunities to learn and earn wages from the Gaje institutions. So most comments indicated a very positive attitude toward their working collaborations. We can share culture, transmit our knowledge, make visible the needs of the people who've struggled for years, learn about politics. It's a chance to make our culture visible to mainstream society, knowledge exchange, these kinds of things. I mean, it was interesting in the previous paper, we just had Guampedia, was it? The idea that the referentes came up with was Encicloron, of course, Encyclopedia for Rom people. They wanted all this information about all the fascinating, wonderful, effective projects they'd been doing. They wanted them at hand in one online database. And that's what we decided would be the outcome of the workshop. So we've got some referentes who've been working to collect all this information that they themselves have written. It's not written about them by the Gaje, they've written this themselves. And about the workshop, the feedback was very positive. They said this was done in our way. This was adjusted to us. We felt really good. The time flowed. In other workshops, we've been exhausted. So this workshop created a new opportunity that hadn't existed before for the referenders to meet and discuss their problems that they experience in their work. But it also generated these new understandings of and knowledge about their capacities and strengths and skills that they just hadn't realized. They shared all these achievements that they just didn't know they'd been doing as a group, as a team. And this really increased feelings of pride and ethnic pride and self-esteem. So the workshop generated ideas for this resource, Enciclorom, which is intended to support referentes and strengthen their capacities to advocate for Romani needs. Now, before they go into a government office where they're called on to give presentations, they can go into this Enciclorom and extract all these projects to show what they've been doing as a team and better advocate for more funding to carry on doing this kind of thing. And they actually said, to finish, we've never had the space to share and talk together before. This helps strengthen us and improve the team. We learn from each other. We should do this. This workshop should be done at the beginning of every year. It strengthens the group and it strengthens our collective work as Rom people. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. That was absolutely fascinating. And yeah, already some nice threads, I think, between papers. So, Sarah, can I call you up? Thank you. The next speaker will be Sarah Barrow, Professor of Film and Media and Pro Vice Chancellor, Arts and Humanities at the University of East Anglia. Sarah has published widely on the connections between cinema, state and society in Peru. Her research has analysed the ecology of cinema production and the role of film festivals in Peru and the work of various Peruvian filmmakers from the last 30 years. Her books include Contemporary Peruvian Cinema, History, Identity and Violence on Screen, and Peruvian Cinema of the 21st Century, Dynamic and Unstable Grounds. Sarah is now working on 2 British Academy funded projects, one on women in Peruvian cinema and the other on young Indigenous women leaders in Amazonia and Peru, working with co-eyes Eylem Atakav, who already mentioned today, and Maria Eugenia Ulfe, in collaboration with community partners and the Catholic University of Peru. And it's this latter project that she's going to be speaking about today on behalf of the wider team. So thank you, Sarah. I will endeavour to do some quick switching overs here.
Thanks so much to Hazel and Sylvia. It's brilliant to hear your wonderful presentations. And also, I know that some colleagues in the room have kind of heard a slightly earlier version of this before. So I sort of apologise that, you'll be hearing again, but the project sort of continues to evolve. And some of you have heard nothing, and I'll be really interested in your feedback. I think with all projects where you aim to have impact, you kind of just need to let them grow and evolve. So bear with me if you have heard some of this before. I hope to have time. Yeah, I hope to have time to show a very short film at the end as well, because, it's cinema, so we have to have a little bit of film. So yeah, this project that I'm presenting on behalf of our team, which includes my fellow colleague here, Professor Eylem Atakav, who is here very much in spirit, but also Makena Maria Eugenia Ulfe, who's also working, I think, with Hazel and others. She's just been here recently as a British Academy visiting fellow. She's a graduate of the Sainsbury Research Unit, and she's one of our visiting professors. So she's very connected with us. But through working with her to develop a partnership with her university, we discovered that not only did we have some sort of aligned interests around gender, identity and community working, but that we could actually connect UEA and her university perhaps more strategically. And so I just want to put it out there that that connection with the Catholic University of Peru is one that colleagues across UEA can benefit from. I'm happy to sort of assist with that. And in fact, next year, some of our history colleagues are going to go out and do some further partnership work there. But what's been great for me, for us, is that through Makena, we were able to make contact with the community groups you can see listed at the top, have to be at the top, on the left-hand side, Omiasek and Onamiap, really, really powerful community organisations with a very sort of political remit about supporting Indigenous women in lots of different parts of Peru. We've been focusing on a very small part of the central Amazon, and I'll say more about that in a second. As you can see, a little like Hazel's project she just spoke about, we have used audiovisual tools, creative tools, I guess, to try to connect with and elicit appropriate sort of, kind of community relevant ideas about how to understand what is the most important part of this project, the potential and impact of Indigenous female community participation and leadership in Amazonian Peru. The word that's missing from that title is young. We've worked with young women, women from 13 through to they're now kind of 23, some of them. All of them have a series of identity kind of things that collide, but all of them understandably have their own individual desires and ambitions as well. The organisation in the middle there, Empoderate, is an organisation based in Peru which connects people, young people, with cinema and enables them to make documentaries. And we hired the leader of that, Caroline Pelican, as our research assistant on the project. And through her, we're able to really ensure that the films were as nicely made as possible, but they are not supposed to be professional films. We have been able to secure some screenings at festivals. That was never the idea from the start, but through her assistance, we were able to, and leadership, we're able to ensure that they were at least kind of viable for that sort of dissemination. So we had this starting point. Ketty Marcelo, who is now the leader of ONAMIAP, one of the biggest organisations, definitely in Peru, but across the Amazon. Our starting point was a quote that we saw from way before we met Ketty. She's an incredibly powerful and intimidating at times woman, but very, very has become an ally of the project, which we really appreciate. And for her, women play a fundamental role in the preservation of biodiversity and ancestral knowledge. However, these contributions often go unrecognised. Probably sounds like a familiar refrain, and we will kind of come on to that, but it just seemed like one that was perhaps a little bit lost there.
Online, which is a me problem.
Oh, okay.
So online people, sorry if it's, I'm going to start sharing this one again because I don't think it was
Sorry,
moving forward. Colleagues. Is that right? Okay, let me just try and share that one again.
Do you know how to do that?
Hopefully.
I don't know.
It was working so far. So let's just check if that's going to.
Does that work better?
That? Let me just check. Yeah, that's working. Yeah. It was working fine here. Oh, thank you. Thank you online.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Sylvia. Oh, yeah, that's good. I think I can remember how you did that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. So, of course, this has kind of been a project very much about identities. And the main objective of our research project has been to understand how these young women that we work with understand themselves as Indigenous citizens. And that notion of citizenship is crucial. They're really not considered to be citizens by the Peruvian state. For many of the reasons that I think Hazel sort of articulated with your groups are just not recognised. And yet what's so important for these young women working with their association is to try to establish themselves as leaders, as citizens within their communities, then in their region, and then within the nation state. They have big ambitions, and why not? And what we kind of really wanted to see was understand what it meant to them to be emerging leaders. Yes, of course, we wanted to help and support in some way through kind of some skills shares development, but also to learn from them. So just a couple of statements that emerged from our very first meetings with the young women. Karen Pamela, who was here in UEA in January, February for a few days, sharing her work and her own experiences. And thank you to colleagues who helped host her. She says, I'm from the Ashanika people. That's number one important to her. From the Waipankuni community, number two importance. Then she talks about herself, her age, and then belonging to the organisation for the Indigenous women of the Central Amazon. That connection with organisation is particularly strong for Karen Pamela. She's definitely one of their rising stars, but she's so committed to the work of that organisation. Whereas several of the other young women have a kind of a come and go, you know, they're kind of doing other things with their lives, but every so often they will meet up and the organisation will help and support them and they will do what they can with it. Another colleague, Abigail, who I saw recently when we did some further work in Lima, says, I'm Yanisha. So there's these two ethnic identities that coincide, are very similar but distinct language and customs, and they're brought together through the organisation. She's Yanisha from the community of Barrow. So those two things really important again. And then she goes on to say, what I hope to get from this workshop, I'll speak more about those in a second, is a greater knowledge and understanding of my area and to share with the other Indigenous women our stories, customs, traditions, traditional plans, to learn as much as possible from all the girls who are here. Now, that was a little surprising output because we thought we were going to learn. Actually, they wanted to learn from each other. And I suppose what we realised through setting up the various workshops out there is that we were helping to provide an opportunity for the young women who otherwise live in quite dispersed and fragmented communities to come together and to do this work, hopefully enjoyable work, hopefully, as Hazel was saying, not too exhausting work. It's exhausting for us, definitely, but hopefully enjoyable work, and to do that together and to feel satisfaction from it. So the locations, and following on from Sylvia's brilliant maps, this is not as good as yours, Sylvia, but I hope this gives an indication of where we travelled to, or the distance to and from. And we've now done that journey a few times. It's quite an interesting one. Obviously, to get to Lima is one thing. That's kind of relatively straightforward. But then to get from Lima out to Satipo, the region there on the right, is a little less straightforward. There is a flight occasionally, but really the better thing in terms of cost and frequency is to get on the bus. with all of your stuff, and that's quite an interesting feat, but it's worth it. And that's the kind of work within area studies that I think many of us do, is the travel, is the labour, is the connecting in order to find, discover, work with and understand the stories there. And it's about showing up, isn't it? It's about being visible. So we did eventually do some in-person workshops after a period of working through the pandemic, and those were held in the region of Junin, in the provinces of Pichinaki and Satipo, sort of way over there on the right in the central Amazon. About 12 hours by bus from the city of Lima, very good service, so, you know, can't really complain about that. Once we got there, then the whole travel became more rickety. And if other colleagues have been out there, I think I can spot somebody who has. It becomes quite interesting to get on a minibus or whatever, some kind of travel that we probably shouldn't talk about too much. But in order to get out to the communities, all sorts of kind of ways of travel. Filming locations were in the communities on average between 40 minutes to 3 hours along the river. And one of the things we really discovered was that the river is such an important source, not just of nurture and nutrients, but of a way of being, a way of living. So the River Perene became like one of the figures, one of the characters in our workshops and our stories. So place is a significant dimension in the films in relation to their ethnic identities, communities, and a constant movement between towns and communities came forward as a key concept. So our project had various features, which sort of grew and developed as we worked together as a team. For a long time online, because we got the money at the start of the pandemic, thought that would be over. It wasn't, so we had to find different ways of working. An increasing focus on gender, that was our starting point, but we didn't really realise that our whole project team would become, through hook or by crook, really totally solely female focused. But that had a very important dimension to us. Working with young people, young women who self-identified as members of an Indigenous community, as we saw on the previous slide, Ashanika or Yanisha, and an Indigenous organisation. So those things were really important to us. Themes that were important to the young women emerged from them. Climate change, massively important to them. Deforestation, contamination, a loss of tradition, knowledge and customs. Ancestral knowledge, intergenerational knowledge comes through in several of the films. There's great importance to them. There's a lot there also to do with language. The young women we worked with did not have the chance at primary level to learn their Ashanika or Yanisha languages because there was a ban on bilingual language. That is gradually coming back, but at the moment, we may find out at some point that it may disappear again, but it's clearly of great importance to the young women who feel that they lost that opportunity and are trying to reclaim it. Audiovisual has been used as a method of investigation and as an output. We didn't conceive of that at the start, but that emerged as a way of connecting, and it emerged from the young women themselves. Yes, a little bit of skills development, but you can imagine with iPhones and so on, all sorts of different phones, they're fairly good at creating stories, but this was a chance for us to basically further those skills with them and to learn from them what they wanted. But really, most importantly, the audiovisual has been a way of allowing, facilitating, supporting, creating a sense of voice from them. And these films continue to have life. I'm kind of learning about anthropology more and more through working with McKenna and colleagues in PUC, that the notion of outputs having their own life is something really important that we continue to explore. So the films continue to be screened. Different members of the project team are presenting different aspects of the project all around the world. Most of the time I know about it. Sometimes I have to sort of be told after, but that's absolutely great. That's as projects like this should be, prompting awareness and further discussion. We always try, obviously we can't today, to have at least one of the young women with us. And I know they're here with us in spirit because they were sending me messages via WhatsApp last night. So they're really pleased that our films continue to be shown. Other important thing was that the project is interdisciplinary and multilingual. And you see there I've included Turkish and Latvian because we had Eylem, who used and kind of enabled us to sort of learn more from her perspective in Turkish. And one of our young women working on the project from our perspective was from Latvia. And that kind of sense of multilingualism and multiculturality was really super important. What are you doing? So we all had to learn more as a project team. This was us before we went out to do our workshops about the historical background of where we were going. It was super important that we didn't kind of rest on our laurels about general understandings of Peru, but really got into the nitty gritty of things that would be super important to the background of the young women and where they are. So thinking about the missions that entered the Selva Central, the Central Amazon back in the 17th century, various ethnic and interethnic uprisings since then, basically a history of violence and discrimination that has come through and continues to come through. All sorts of conflicts about land recognition, which continue to this date. And in 1980 onwards, it has now more or less ended, but there continue to be sort of remnants of it. The internal armed conflict with, for example, Shining Path had a particular impact on many of the Indigenous groups of Peru. And actually the experiences of the communities that we worked with for this project have really been little understood and little kind of articulated. But we needed to appreciate that kind of context, that very recent context of violence, discrimination and invisibility in order to be as sensitive as possible before we kind of really embarked on this project, and certainly before we went to do any field work. So you can imagine that's a huge piece of work, and I apologise for not doing it proper justice with just one slide. This really largely has been a project of methods, production, participation and circulation. I've said sharing because the word compartir, Spanish for share, was so important as a concept. It came through time and time again. We were sharing through fieldwork, sharing food, sharing ideas, sharing ancestral knowledge, absolutely at the heart of everything, and is a key concept to the writing that we're doing out of this. The photograph here is of an experience of sharing when the young women came to UEA last year. A really nice kind of intergenerational and cross-disciplinary group came together for some additional workshops that, again, we hadn't planned. That was rather spontaneous, but it was a way to try to portray different elements of importance to Karen Pamela, who I've mentioned, who's in the middle, around their culture and traditions, and using the designs on the kushma, which is the outfit that they're wearing. They wanted to demonstrate how important that individual community identity is, and to sort of bring everybody into an understanding of that. Back a tiny bit, we had to start the project properly through virtual workshops. It was bit of a nightmare. You can imagine, even today, it's like tricky. You can imagine trying to get everybody connected across all the different communities every 2 or 3 weeks. It was never 150 minutes, but we would be online for 150 minutes and they would dial in and out and we would try to have some activities. Really what it was a program of trust building, of relationship building, of connecting. And I have to say, we were very inspired by a lecture that Iokine, you gave early on. You probably don't know this, but early on in the time of our project, when I think for some group at UEA, you gave a keynote around that notion of trust building. And that really, of course, was so fundamentally important to the start of our project as well. We managed to kind of keep together most of the young women here, but for understandable reasons, not all of them could continue with the project. Things happen in their lives. So, but we did have a core who stayed with us throughout, and we've obviously stuck with them. So we had online workshops. We kind of obviously discovered all sorts of difficulties around infrastructure, digital literacies and inequalities. They further confirmed our hunches, really. But what we wanted to do was encourage active participation. So not just kind of doing online lectures or discussions, but actually trying across the oceans to do some icebreaker work, some audiovisual work. And of course, knowing they all had phones, we knew we could kind of with them enable them to create some work across the airwaves, so to speak. One of our first icebreakers was just simply to say, go and grab something from where you are, just an object, come back and talk to us about it. You can see there's a theme of shells here, which was lovely to hear about the kind of the importance of shells. And I know that that in itself connects to many other parts of the world. You can probably guess which were the ones on the western side of the world and which were the ones with our group in the Amazon. But it was a really nice chance from us right for the start, just to sort of test in a way whether we could open up these conversations. And we were really humbled by how how open they were and how trusting they were, more or less from the start. In part, this was because we built the connection, first of all, through the organisers of the main organisation, community organisation, and they basically said, look, go and work with this group, it will be fine. So we were sort of given an in there. Like others we've heard of today, we used the kind of the mapping methodology as an icebreaker when we eventually did go to do some in-field workshops, really just to establish what place meant to them. And in the one on the right in particular, you can see that the river, which is absolutely essential and central to everything they think about. England's down here, Lima is over there, understandably, and I think Cusco was sort of out, but absolutely central to everybody, and each individual kind of being marked out with a flower or a leaf or something that was important to them. So many ideas sprung up just from that mapping piece at the start of the project. Some echo. Oh, that's me twice. You don't need me twice. Can somebody? It's gone. That would be weird, wouldn't it? So our in-person workshops and fieldwork took place in the first instance over 6 days back in August 2021, I think, and then we went back the following year to do in-community screenings. So it took a long time to do what probably seems like small things, but it's partly pandemic, but partly around travel and partly around building trust. The screenings in the communities in August 2022, there you can see some intergenerational ancestral knowledge sharing, which was at the heart of many of the films being produced. And one of the things we were kind of supporting with was interviewing and interviewing techniques. Just a few more images here of the in-person fieldwork. And then through this notion of storytelling, we also spent time, the first period of 2022, connecting again. We're absolutely determined that our young women would be involved in as much as possible in the post-production, in the editing. So of course, that's where the story really gets crafted in terms of the introduction, the middle and the end. It was hard slog getting everybody to engage and turn up and be involved, but it was thought to be so important to the final outputs, so that when we went back, which I'm going to skip that one, when we went back and screened the films, whether in communities or in out here, we could be sure that the young women were proud of what we'd produced. They were proud of themselves and they were happy with what they'd done. So we continue to do the sharing work, both here in the UK and out with communities, and continue to learn from that about how the young women can use the audiovisual tools and how we can help them and support them to be breaking down some of those stereotypes. The community screenings took place last August, and here is an example of what looks like, you know, quite a settled situation. In fact, prior to setting up the screening, completely from scratch, there really was no black wall, there really was no screen, there was nothing. We had turned up at the community centre and found it to be locked, with no community leader in sight. He had decided to absent himself from the community that day and to basically defy any recognition of his young, you know, woman in the community. She was enormously upset, as you can imagine. This was not what had been expected. She felt humiliated by that. But of course, everybody rallied round and we found another space and we built a cinema for her to be able to show her film and share her situation. But again, we learned a lot from the dynamics of community in that situation and how we needed to show so much care and sensitivity to support our young women with that situation. That could have been absolutely devastating, but having caught up with them again recently and talked it through again, we've realised that in the end all was okay, and in fact she was kind of really pleased to be connected with the project in this way. It was also a lovely occasion because many of the people that she'd filmed were there to watch, and it was like, you know, one of those situations where you watch films and you see people kind of who often don't have huge opportunities to watch cinema in this kind of cinema-like space, actually recognising themselves on the screen and being inspired by their own stories. We also produced with the young women, they produced, we watched, we learnt, a manifesto. The manifesto is now kind of fully written up. It's been sent out to various community groups, community leaders, embassies, stakeholders across Peru. And normally when we have an event like this, one of the young women will read from a section of that manifesto. And recently we saw that happen in Lima, and it was extremely powerful. I'm not going to attempt to do it bad justice by reading a bit now, but it's a series of demands, of desires and ambitions from the young women. And you'll be able to see it in more detail if you would like to on our website. These are the young women who are involved from the start on the left and who remained involved in various aspects of the project. And then on the right-hand side, it's kind of the full team, including some wonderful translation students from UEA who helped us with the subtitling and the captioning and so on of the films, so that we can share and so we can continue to give these films life. And so that the demands, desires of the young women as emerging leaders can be understood and better made visible. What we really want to do going next is further sort of impact related work, developing the kind of the visibility, the awareness and the education side of this work, so that we can really bring the ambitions of these young women to life. And you can find out a bit more on our website if you'd like to. So thank you for listening. I think we're going to watch one of the short films now. I do believe we have a short, tiny bit of time just to show that one. It's only 3 minutes long. And it is subtitled. It's called Ojos de Agua, which is the water hole. You'll see. Yeah, fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, the filmmaker. Thank you. What's that for now? Fabulous. Okay, and finally, Our final speaker will be Iokine Rodriguez-Fernandez, Associate Professor of Environment and Development at DEV UEA, where she forms part of the Global Environmental Justice Group. She specializes in local environmental knowledge and conflict transformation in Latin America using participatory action research. She's worked in Venezuela, Guyana, Ecuador, Chile, Bolivia, and Colombia, building local and institutional capacity to transform environmental conflicts. Her work on environmental conflict transformation focuses on issues of local history, local knowledge, power, environmental justice, equity, and intercultural dialogue. She's co-founder of Grupo Confluencias, a consortium of Latin American conflict resolution practitioners, researchers, and institutions actively engaged for more than 10 years developing processes of environmental conflict transformations. So I will hand over. Do you? Yes, of course. Yes, yes.
Just need to download a web page.
Okay, sure.
And then
just
make sure that people can see it well.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. I will bear with us for a minute while we yeah. Want to yeah. Talk amongst yourselves for a second. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Okay,
excellent. And then just link it to the
sure,
so that everybody can see it.
Okay, almost there. That one there, yeah. Okay, I think we should be good to go. Oh, actually, sorry, would you rather have that one up? Yeah. Okay.
Can I put it big?
Yes, definitely. There you go.
Great, thank you.
Okay, fingers crossed.
Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
later.
Thank you very much for being here. Right, I think Tom talked a lot about my area of specialization, which is environmental conflicts. But I had the fortune in 2017 to approach some colleagues in Colombia about a call that the UKRI had launched post the peace, the 2016 peace agreement in Colombia, to carry out transformative research that could help strengthen the peace agreement between FARC, one of the main guerrilla groups in Colombia, and the Colombian government. And they launched this call for UK and Colombian academic institutions to do research that could strengthen the peace accord. And one of my colleagues there from an organization called Eureka Educativa had been working a lot prior to that with schools, trying to strengthen peace building from a pedagogical perspective in primary schools. And she had already a project going which needed to continue, and she asked me if we could actually strengthen that project. And to make it fit with the call, she had this idea of linking community organizations and schools to develop a peace building process between communities and organizations that could actually talk about peace building perspectives from the ground up and not from the top down, which is the typical peace accord. The context in which peace accords normally take place are very sort of top-down state strengthening processes. And the concern was that Colombia, as many of you probably know, although it has a very long tradition of a very long armed conflict, it has a huge tradition of peace building from community organizations that have been for decades proposing ways to overcome violence. So the concern was that the peace building process was a very top-down process, and what do community organizations and what do schools say or have to say about how to build peace? So we set up this project, which was one of the 10 projects that were funded to help develop a bottom-up perspective in a region called Tolima, which is where the FARC originated, in the middle of Colombia. And I'm not going to talk in length about the project. I just want to, building on the wonderful work that our previous presenters have shared with us about, how do you do participatory research to make a difference. I really want to tell you a little bit about the project, but share a small sort of 9-minute video which we produced in January this year about the impacts of the project, because this project started in 2018, finished formally in 2021, but we've continued doing things with impact funds to enhance the results of the project. And I want to talk a little bit about that, show you where to find these outputs, and tell you very briefly about what the project was about, how we did it, who formed part of the project, and then we'll watch this video, which is actually helping you see the people that we worked with. So this image that you have in the screen, it's the repository of the project. We created a web page just to put everything that we produced in this project. So this was a project carried out between 3 main institutions: UEA, University of Ibagué in Tolima, and an organization called Eureka Educativa that works particularly with schools in transformative pedagogies. The total team amounted to 100 people. We were 3 organizations, about 10 academics. The rest were 8 primary schools from 4 municipalities in Tolima and 8 community organizations. And they linked basically on two main themes. One theme was for schools to focus on reconstructing how the conflict had affected education and life in school. So it was more like a backwards perspective, reconstructing the impact of the conflict and what it had happened in community life, how teachers had coped with the armed conflict, and how they were trying to look forward. But community organizations didn't want to look back. A little bit related to what you said, Hazel. In Colombia, you have this very interesting phenomenon that people that have been through 10 decades or more of armed conflict are tired of people coming and asking them about, the impacts of the conflict. They are very much forward-looking. They perceive themselves as survivors, as people with agency to deal with war and to strive in the middle of that violence. And also there's a fear to talk about violence because this is still an ongoing conflict. It's not peace accords, it's not the 2016 peace accord is not the first one that has been signed, and have been 3 more before that or more. And there is violence in different parts of the country. So people don't, they're not naive about what this peace process is about or should be about. But I actually wanted to talk about how they build peace in the middle of violence. So that was one of the very important first decisions we had to make in the project, and allowing also communities to tell themselves how they wanted this project to be, was to help them tell stories that help make visible how they build peace in the middle of violence, and also which type of stories they wanted to tell. So we ended up working with women organizations, youth environmental organizations, agricultural farmers, and organizations at the community level that wanted to work on identity building and reconstruction. So those were the four areas that we focused on peace building strategies around those themes. And the project took many different turns, allowing people to tell their stories through different methodologies. We worked a lot with participatory videos, writing stories. You're going to see Address, one of the community organizations that wanted to rebuild or reconstruct their history in the village, to let the story that the war had silenced and how the war erased their identity, to let it come to the open again. So they decided to do this through a dress that they wanted to design, and the dress, the costume, tell the story. You'll see all this in the video that I'm going to share with you. I just want to really quickly talk you through the web page, because it's public. All the project is there, the objectives are there, the members are there. So if you somewhere here, if you type translate to English, yes, it goes into English, so you should be able to see it in English, yes. If you go double click on the right on the mouse, you turn the web page into English, so you can actually see it in English as well. And so this web page is designed. In the top, you'll see the different components. In the start button, you can see a little bit of description of what the project is about. All the objectives and all that. Then you have who we are, which is what I want to show you a little bit about. So those are the UK team members, my 3 colleagues, Teresa, Cristina, and Ulrich. Then the 5 members from Ibagué University. And then we have the 8 community organizations with a little description of each one of them. So I don't want to stop very much, but each municipality has 2 or 3 organizations. And these were all community members that had different activities that they wanted to develop in relation to how they have been building peace in the last decades. Then you have a description of the project, how we understand the project, and some videos telling our focus of decolonial, also action research methods. But one of the things that we decided to do with this webpage was to also share the methodologies that we used to produce this research. So we have a toolbox divided in 2 sections. What do you want to do in terms of things around peace building research? So methods that can help you reflect on peace and conflict. How do people feel the territory? How do you imagine your future? And how do you talk about power? So this toolbox, if you click on each one of them, you'll find different methods that we used to reflect on conflict and peace, from brainstorming, biographies, participatory photography, mapping, etc. If you want to actually also talk about narrating, exploring, or analyzing topics, then you have methods that can help you do that, and a brief description of each one of those methods. So this is designed as an interactive web page that you can actually have methods that people that want to do research, participatory research on peace building, you can access that. Then we have links for dialogues that we also had to create. A lot of this project at the end had to be turned into as we all did online, and we did a lot of virtual dialogues. And a last part, which is very, very important for us, is the products. As I said, we made a lot of focus in this project on doing not only participatory research that can make a difference, but producing outputs that would make visible the way the community organizations are trying to build peace in the middle of a conflict. So here you will find all the products that we produced from the participatory videos made by the organizations telling their stories of peace building from an environmental perspective, from women, peace builders. There are 2 of those. Then we have a very interesting interactive, we call live map. I'm not going to open that one. It's we call talking maps, where an important part of helping people reconnect to the territory after there had been a very long history of war was people to reconnect to what the territory means to them. So with cameras, with videos, with drawing, people, the different organizations worked for a long time doing maps and identifying things about the territory that were meaningful to them. And in this talking maps, you will find elements of each of the municipalities that have a meaning to the communities, to the organization. I can't remember how you open this. Should open now. That's the sound of and those are community members that are your guides in the talking map. And you click here and you start uploading each one of the maps. And so the map is divided in four themes: the territory that we feel, the territory that we dream, and the territory that we transform. And each of those sections has a section for each of the municipality with elements of the territory that the communities chose to talk about their municipality. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, just to give you a little glimpse into the sort of things that they uploaded. So you can spend some time doing it yourselves if you want to later. But if you click on the top, out of the top titles, another little map will open, and it has icons for films, for videos, for photographies that the communities chose to tell stories about their territories. Okay, so that's another project. And then it's a series of publications Some of these we funded with the project funds. Some of them we funded with further impact funds, like this one. This is a book by one of the community organizations. So this is the most recent one, between young people and women, telling the stories of historical reconstruction in their village that they decided to talk about. And this is an academic book that we wrote. This woven is the one that of women peacebuilding network called Chaparagona Peacebuilding Network, that they wrote about the historical institutional memory of the women organization that they write about themselves. And this book, which I have a series of copies and it's been written in English and Spanish, is about the systematization of the project, and it has all the methodology. So it's a book version of what you can also find available in the webpage. And if anybody wants a copy, you can have one here. So, I mean, that's in a nutshell what this very long, massive project has been about and the outputs that we produced. And I just want to show you the video that we produced in January this year. We, after COVID, we had the pending commitment to take back all these products to the communities and to share their outputs, because we had been sending them individually to each community organization as we managed to produce them, but we hadn't had a final meeting to actually share and come together for people to talk and to share their outputs. So we had a workshop in January where all the members of the community came together again, and they shared between themselves. They told themselves stories, and we had like a balance, a final sort of balance of the project. Now I'm going to share that small video with you, 9 minutes. You will see that dress in the video. That's one of the outputs. It's not actually shown in the web page, but it is shown in the video that tells the story of how that dress was produced. And I can talk a lot about each of these things because each one is so beautiful and valuable. And see if I can open this now. I hope people on the web are watching can see this. Do you think it'll be okay? Okay, so as you saw in the last part of the video, that workshop finished. The last part of the workshop was getting together ideas on how to give continuity to this very successful and wonderful project. And we're now working on a second stage, which is through small impact funds, we want to apply to a large further funding project that will allow us to expand the impact of the project at a more regional level and at a wide scale, working with more community organizations that are also doing bottom-up work on peace building. And one of the things that came out of this project, which was quite, I suppose, innovative, was that for many Colombians that have been exposed to a process of war that has disconnected people from their territories, displaced, community organizations are very much interested in rebuilding that identity, their connection to land, to territory. And we're working on a project now which is on memory, but not the typical sort of memory to reconstruct violence or to do reparative justice, but more memory of identity, of helping people reconnect to their roots. And so that's the second phase that we're trying to work on now, helping people talk about memory, but from a more cultural identity perspective, and help Colombians in rural areas rebuild their connection to land and the culture. So for those that are interested, I'll leave some of these copies here. I have more, and this is more of a, it's a book that tells us the story of how the project was carried out. It also has all the methods and a bit of theory as well, more academic. Those there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we just about have 5 minutes for questions before coffee. Probably best if we can ask Hazel and Sarah to come up as well, and I'll if you stay here as well, Iokine, and I'll see if Sylvia's there still. Ah, you are. Hey, Sylvia. Excellent. Yeah, I think we're doing well. I think obviously we can all see some amazing affinities and confluences between these different projects already. But let me open it up to questions. Online, I think we should be able to host some questions from you if you want to put your hand up, and I will keep an eye on it. And of course, anyone in the room. So who'd like to start us off? Ah, yes, Roger, thank you. No, I think they're holding fire at the moment. Thank you.
Basically, does that also mean reconnecting with the idea of territory in the place in which people are displaced?
Well, in Tolima, yes. I mean, for the areas that we worked with, the organizations that we're working with still live there. They're still based there. So it's very much about telling. So the dress that you saw briefly in the film, they're showing their dress. That dress is telling the story of their community, their village, where they live with, through their embroidery. And the dress identifies different places that have cultural meaning: a river, a tree. The different parts of the dress are telling stories of things that have been made invisible by war, because people were just basically stuck inside their houses during most part of the conflict. So it's not so much. It is about the youth having been pushed out of their territories. Some still are there, but the women are mostly there. And now the youth are coming back or have been coming and going, but it's very much about the place where they are based.
Can I just ask a couple of very quick process questions? Iokine, the research or the project was very much about action research. Can I ask, in the original proposal, was it to UKRI? Were you explicit about using action research? Yeah. And to Sarah. When you had this issue in the village with the last film, where the male leadership didn't want it to be screened, in hindsight, do you think that could have been avoided?
We did everything we were advised to do. So that community was one where when we went out and did the workshops, we had to go through a special ceremony with that community leader, which is absolutely fine. And once that had been, we got approval from him, he introduced the only community where this had to happen, so it's slightly different everywhere. He then ensured that some kind of loudspeaker went around the whole community to let them know that we had been formally introduced and that this was happening. So when we went back, we had that connection, and via the owner, but also via the organisation, we went back to them and asked permission to go with them again. So I don't know what more we could have done, to be honest. But I suppose when it happened, we didn't spend too much time worrying. We just got on with it for the safety on the road. Sure. But we did obviously reflect on it, and we did report it back to the organisation. But it was interesting that we had to go through a series of extra hoops with that community at our previous visit, which we'd done and had been fine. So we adopted that in no other community have we had that situation. So these things happen, unfortunately. Question of some kind of internal conflict.
Because of our participatory research, not action research, right. And we did have a tension between the team members, between participatory research and action research, the term and the implications. The Colombian Educativa team, one of the members of this organization has been a student of Faz Borda, who in Colombia proposed action research as a method. And he was very skeptic about the extent to which we should be engaged in action. But whereas the University of Iokine and us were very much in favor of action research because of its transformative potential and because of the political implications. We are very open about engaging with power. Whereas the Educativa is much more pedagogical, school-based. They're very wary about, taking it to a political stand, and they prefer to do just participatory. And there was a lot of tension between. You could have a long conversation. The difference between action and participatory research.
Well, yeah, it's just in relation to funders and getting it, getting the proposal through. The use participatory.
Yeah, participatory is fun.
Yeah.
You have to put action research and know. Thanks for that question.
Any more questions, Susan? Can I just check online? Can you hear the questions and answers? Yeah. Okay, great. That's fine. Thank you. Yeah, go on then, Susan. Thank you.
Sure.
Can you hear this question, Sylvia?
Not now, though.
Oh, okay. I'll repeat the question and hopefully.
Yeah. No sound.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to come up and? Okay, yeah, good idea. Yeah.
Sylvia, I just wondered if you could say something about the contrast between the political objectives of your work and the community bottom-up objectives of your work, and the difficulties or contrasts or the differences between those two things, and also to the other three speakers as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. The discussion about participatory research and participatory action research is an ongoing discussion. I come from a place where I see it as a settler responsibility. That's how it's been explained to me. And with that responsibility comes rather than leading, you're guided by the community. So a long story short, what I have found is it's one action to be anti-military or working for demilitarization, but it's such a part of daily life here. People serve in the military at the highest rates. My mother works for the military, so it's much more complex than that. So while you can have that action research, or those actions, you could spend all your energy doing that. With the storytelling, that's something that cuts across all generations, all political views, You know, you can connect with grandma and you can connect with your younger brother. So it's really within the storytelling place. And then it's up to the young folks. They might not even think they are doing activism because that's such a loaded term here. But by sharing their story and sharing their vision and sharing what they want for the future, it's an oral culture as well. And really the audio and visual is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Okay, I'm going to attempt to liberate a roving mic here and see if this will. Is this working? Can you hear me? Oh, gosh. Okay, I'm going to pass the mic then. If we just have some quick responses as well, if anyone wants to respond to Hazel, go Hazel. Thank you. Break for coffee afterwards. Thank you, Hazel.
Well, I suppose it depends how you're defining political, but I think what I see in Latin America, I don't know if you agree, is that sort of the conventional systems of democracy, secret ballot, that kind of politics, there's very little trust in that as a system. And I see just engagement in cultural activities, singing, making art, cooking, those are political activities for some people in some contexts. So does that, I forget exactly what the question was, but it was about community and political, top versus bottom. I make that distinction that, yeah, and I'll pass the microphone to someone else.
Yeah, completely agree. Also agree with what Sylvia said about not using that term activism. Our young women that we work with clearly are activists. They wouldn't self-identify in that way though, and wouldn't want to, because it's sort of too dangerous, and but also it's not how they see themselves. But clearly, I think we could perhaps, describe them in that way. I think the incident that I mentioned in the community is where the politics, the bottom and the top up, are colliding, and where we constantly had to keep thinking about the political context that surrounded the participatory work that we were aiming to do, and to be super careful but not make it overly visible in order to make it comfortable. It's so complicated, isn't it? I don't know if I've addressed your question properly, but thank you for it.
Well, I think, when you work with community organizations that are doing political work, it's very difficult to keep the research and politics not connected. And I mean, from our perspective, the whole idea of doing transformative research is to help people enhance their agency to produce change. And it happened very naturally. It was an evolution of the project where people connect to each other, talk about these things, as you said. And as Sylvia said, and many of the organizations start talking between themselves for the first time through this type of research. And that in itself creates political agency. One of the people, in fact, one of the community members, Jefferson, actually just won in the local elections as councillor as a result of he is a natural leader. But one of the things that this project helped him was to increase his visibility and political agency. So I mean, I'm happy that is the result of all this in a way.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I think to keep us on track, we better pause it there. So let me say thank you again to our speakers for starting us off so brilliantly today. So thank you. And should we keep to a 15-minute coffee break? Yeah, so we'll be back about 11:20. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, and back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you so much.